getting underway. First person I want to thank is Elizabeth. She disappeared. Here she is. She was instrumental in setting it all up and organising it. Sasha, is she here? Sasha? No, she here? No, Sasha's been gone, but Sasha got all the banners, t-shirts and everything organised, so thank you very much, Sasha. That's fantastic, and she did it all out of her own pocket. And she said she's donated to the cause, so that's fantastic. Now, the other people I'd like to thank is the people that have come from far and wide. I know there's people in the room who have come down for the march from Queensland. There's people from Gippsland. Anywhere else? Colac. Sorry?
Hamilton.
Frankston Law. So thank you so much everyone for coming, because without you what we did today wouldn't have been possible. And thank you to the people on the megaphones, Jim, Tia. And if I've forgotten anyone, I apologise, but thank you. Alright, what we're going to talk about today is basically the election that must be stopped. This election, like was said during the march, is something that can't go ahead, and we need to look at why. So, voting in September validates the government's actions to date, and so you might find yourself after the 2013 election, you could be asking yourself, well, what other rights are going to be robbed from me? What additional freedoms will I lose? What extra overlays will I have on my land? What additional things will I need permits for? How else will Big Brother monitor me? What additional taxes will I be paid? By what other means will they steal from me? Because what's going on is stealing. There's no other word for it. Since January 2007, many of our politicians, judges and magistrates have had criminal charges laid against them. Our Prime Minister, Julie Gillard, has a number of charges against her by over 50 people. What does this actually mean? The original charge that was laid against the Prime Minister is the following. On the 1st of January 2004, the Government of Western Australia at Perth, Western Australia, inclusive of the Executive, Legislature and Judicial arms, in agreement with the Commonwealth, did enact an overt act titled Acts Amended and Repeal Courts and Legal Practices Act 2003, Western Australia. By such enactment, an act of treason was committed. Such treason has been concealed by the defendant since the date of enactment up to and inclusive of the present date. As you can see, that was filed on the 29th of January 2007. And Julia Gillard looks worried there, so she should be. What does this original charge mean? Well, the charge was for misprision of treason. So the charge relates to the actual knowledge that Julia Gillard had and the concealment of such knowledge. The knowledge being the fact that in Western Australia both the Queen and the Crown were removed without the required referendum. This has caused a fracturing of the Federation and means that there's invalid senators sitting in Canberra. How did they do this? They did this via the unlawful act called the Acts Amendment, Repeal, Courts and Legal Practices Act 2003. They also removed the Oath of Allegiance out of the Courts and Tribunals Legislation Further Amendment Act 2000. So we said that senators are sitting in Canberra invalidly. Let's look at why they're sitting in there invalidly. What we need to look at first is the process, the election process, so we can understand why we claim it's invalid. So 6 weeks before the date of the planned election, the Prime Minister and the Governor of the state prorogue the outgoing Parliament. This means the outgoing Parliament sits in caretaker mode and cannot pass any new laws until the newly elected Parliament is sworn in. The Governor of the state issues a writ for the election to occur. Here we must visit Section 12 of the Constitution, and that's Section 12 there. the issue of writs. The governor of any state may cause writs to be issued for elections of the state. With the crown removed though, with the crown removed and replaced by the state, is the writ that is issued without the crown valid? No. Has the governor issued the writ according to section 12 of the Constitution? So with an invalid writ, is the election a valid election? It's invalid, it's unlawful, and not according to the Constitution, which is the law of our land. So, yeah, we'll stop halfway through for some questions, so I'll just get to a point where we can stop and then we'll just discuss that. So, with an invalid writ and an invalid election, are the elected senators actually sitting validly in Canberra? No. Have the senators been sitting validly or lawfully since the removal of the crown? No. Okay. Might take a break then. Someone mentioned they wanted questions. If anyone's got any questions or comments or anything they want to make on what we've gone through so far, and then we'll continue. Yeah, hang on a second.
Mine is more than a question. Without doing a head count, are you fully aware that you're sitting as a common law grand jury right now? Without doing a head count?
Yep. Yes.
You're in agreement?
We are in agreement.
You're actually now, and you do not have to be elected to be in a common law grand jury. Is that correct or incorrect?
That is correct.
You only have to have a pulse.
Yes, we're all flesh and blood entities.
George.
You can instantly turn this to the presentment. Now, there's three forms of how you do this: information, presentment, indictment. Now, as a common law grand jury, you cannot get an indictment because you can't get anyone to administer it for you. But you've done the walk, now do the talk. As of this point, sit as a common law grand jury, which means there'll be a piece of paper here put out sometime or other before you walk through that door to go home. You put your full name in there, your address, and sign it. So it's clearly identified. And somebody can't say, well, who's this? And then when that document is formally then, which is a formal document coming from people in a common law grand jury, and we can have that all officially or whatever, you've already got it right now. If you don't want to put your signature or whatever on that piece of paper, that's your choice. But how many do you need on that piece of paper to make it a common law grand jury? 25. We got that easy. But so that it just doesn't become a presentation where you all go back and go home and say, what do we do next? Make sure the next session is that you're looking at what is presented here is in actual fact your information. That's the information part of a presentment. Then it's actually now being presented. You've now seen the charge up, and you need to identify how that charge is. So that it has what you call the jury, and this is what I said to the judiciary in Sunshine just a few weeks ago, because the judiciary is completely concealing this, is it's going to be completely taken out of the judicial decision's hands. It will go back to the people to vote. So do not see this as something that's not, you can't do right now. In the next half an hour, you can sign a piece of paper because it'll all go on the electronics. And at that point, you have a written piece of paper from people within Werribee, as in you came into Werribee. It doesn't matter where you came from, as long as you came in with a poll. I'm saying that quite purposely. But in the next half an hour, you can present a document that is based on that criminal charge, that, and here comes the problem of why they're concealing it. When it was first laid, the public prosecutors come in and take it over. And then they said, we declined to present. Now, Julia Gillard would be totally correct if she says, well, a charge was laid, but it was withdrawn. But she's hiding the second stage of it. When they failed to present, then it was walked across the road to the full court of the Supreme Court on the 29th of January 2007 for grand jury. So the grand jury then nullified the public prosecutors taking it over. So it's the second stage that Julian Gillard has concealed. And the judiciary, and I include every one of them, Magistrates Court, County Court, Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, inclusive of the High Court. So they're already fully committed to Agenda 21. But is that to defraud you? Now the essence here is not that the Crown was removed. The essence is that the Crown was removed without your consensual decision in a referendum. That's the real issue. And the charge is misprision of treason, which means a concealment of an act of treason. Now treason is breach of allegiance in common law. And you only have to see, was the allegiance breached? If you're happy with that, please sign the piece of paper. Now we're going to have to make up a piece of paper because that wasn't part of this, but we'll do that. In the interim, that wasn't really a question, it was a statement.
Any other questions or statements?
Yes, I'll
Sit up back and make up the things. So why, to avoid all of you impacting at that point at the end, just if you think you've got an indictment or a presentment, please just come up, put your name on the piece of paper, etc. And then it'll be done during the course of the presentation. That way you won't have impact point at the door.
Okay, so we went through the original charge that was laid against Julie Gillard. Then there's been other additional charges this year. So they were on the 10th of May and the 14th of May. And they've gone into the High Court, I believe. And those charges were the accused currently sitting in the federal seat of Labour, inclusive of Werribee, Lyndon, Altona, Point Cook and Melton, in the state of Victoria, Federated States, failed to disclose on Form 60 of the Australian Electoral Commission in relation to disqualification or disqualification under Section 44 of the Constitution Act. Sorry, that shouldn't say 1000. Should say 1900. Pending grand jury indictment application relating to the criminal offence of misprision of treason lodged on the 29th of January 2007 into the criminal jurisdiction of the full court Supreme Court in the state of Victoria, and that was charged under common law fraud. Now you may say, well, what does all that mean? So we'll go through and we'll explain that additional charge. So to nominate for a political office, each candidate is required to fill in an AEC, which is the Australian Electoral Commission form. It's called Form 60. And it must be completed by every candidate. Now within that Form 60, there's a candidate declaration section. Candidates are asked 3 questions in that declaration. The first one is, are you over the age of 18 years? She can't deny that. Are you an elector or are you qualified to be an elector? And the third question is, by virtue of Section 44 of the Constitution, are you capable of being chosen or of sitting as a member of the House of Representatives? If we go to the next slide, this is Form 60. It's available to be downloaded off the AEC website. Page 1 is the cover page, and this section here is the candidate registration, which will go to the next slide, and it gives you the candidate statement and declaration. So you'll see those questions here. I am 18 years of age, I am an elector or qualified to be an elector, and I am not, by virtue of Section 44 of the Constitution, incapable of being chosen or of sitting as a member of the House of Representatives. Now, if by some chance, when Julia Gillard filled in her Form 60, she didn't know what Section 44 was, then she can go back to page 1, as it says there, go back a slide further. And here is Section 44 of the Constitution. So she can read it and see what section of it is she disqualified under. So next one.
When did you sign that?
That was for the 2010 election, federal election. No, it wasn't. It was before that.
Oh, so you only got passed before you became Prime Minister, so was it after 2007?
Yeah, it was after 2000. Yeah.
Let me answer that. That's signed by every politician in every election ever since the Constitution came into position, and each politician actually has never read it. because Mark Latham admitted to me that I've never read that. I said, well, why'd you sign it? And I said, you don't even know what section 44 says. So they're signing a piece of paper, Form 60. They have no knowledge of what section 44 is saying.
And, sorry. Correct. Correct. So that means then that she's lied on that form. In her declaration, she's made a false declaration. And that's what that second charge was about. And this is section 44 here, and it says that, and it's about disqualification from being chosen or sitting as a House of Representatives member. Any person who is under acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience or adherence to a foreign power, or is subject to a citizen or entitled to the rights or privileges of a subject or a citizen of the foreign power. Now, if the United Nations Agenda 21 is not a foreign power, I don't know what is. And point 2 is also is attainted of treason. Now, the charge, remember, was misprision of treason. So she's attainted of treason. And then we go down to the bottom of section 44 and says, shall be incapable of being chosen or of sitting as a senator or a member of the House of Representatives. That's clearly stated on the form, but like Brian said at the back, probably didn't even read it when she signed it. Okay, so we continue on. So how do we know what Julia Gillard actually declared on her Form 60 in the 2010 federal election? Well, we know by two ways. The first one is candidates put their Form 60s on the table and everyone gets to see them, whoever's standing in that election. Another candidate saw her form. But the second way we know is that had she answered yes, it would have resulted in an instant disqualification, because she would have been incapable of being chosen or of sitting as a senator or a member of the House of Representatives. So had she said yes, it would have been instant disqualification and she wouldn't be where she is today. Now, what are the implications for the selection panel that chooses her to sit as a candidate? Is the selection panel concealing something? Are the selection panel just as guilty? Did the selection panel know of Julia Gillard's charges pending a grand jury hearing with 23 electors? Is the selection panel part of the government interference in the judiciary preventing these charges being heard by a grand jury? Have the electors been lied to and deceived? Of course we have. Have Australians had an unlawful government making laws and governing them since the removal of the Crown? Yep, they're held accountable for these illegal laws. So what if the election does go ahead? This means that we as electors give the elected officials the authority to go ahead and implement whatever laws they want to. What if so we the people give our government authority through our votes. Recognise the power of your vote and don't give it away, especially to people knowingly taking it by deception, lies, omission and fraud. So, what happens if we do vote? Like we said, we're giving them authority to implement whatever laws they want. And they continue to implement these laws without referendums. They continue along the path to the full implementation of the UN Agenda 21. And if anyone hasn't read Agenda 21, I urge you to get a copy of it. And they continue along the path to full implementation of the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs. They've set themselves a 1,000-day time limit, and that challenge ends on the 31st of December 2015.
In the council at home, in the council at home, I've just found out last night that they're implementing sustainability through the government, our council, and tomorrow and today they're informing the people, because they're in such a hurry now to get it through, that they're doing it on a Sunday and Saturday, councillor, to tell people how we're going to implement it into the council. Yeah.
And they're also doing that in our shire, in 3 different towns on the same day, so they're going to go from 1.5 hours there to another town. That's how quickly they're doing it, not one day. Yeah, I'm saying, yeah, that's right.
So you need to look up your websites and find out when you're going to have these meetings in your area and go to them and go and tell them. Is that right, Jerry?
That's right.
That's it.
So, like we saw, they've set themselves a 1,000-day limit, and if anyone wants to read the Millennium Development Goals, They're not very long, they're available online and you can download them through the United Nations website. Alright, so what are their steps that they're going to do this? Well, we know they had the Rio Conference, the United Nations Rio Conference in 1992. 20 years on from that was the one in June 2012. And they should have had everything implemented. Now, the reason why they've got these development goals now is because they didn't get to their target by June 2012. So how are they going to do this? Well, the first thing we've seen already, they want local government recognition within the Constitution via the referendum that is due to occur with the election. That's why we cannot afford for that election to go ahead. They want then to bring in the Republican referendum. We've already seen both political parties are already starting to gather momentum on that path. And they're doing this in an attempt to formally legalise the unlawful, unconstitutional removal of the Crown. Now, how do we know this? Well, they told us. What more do we want? Kim Beazley stated in federal parliament that the United Nations has given the federal government a mandate of ownership for housing, farms, property and business to government control once the Republic has been proclaimed. They've told us this is what they want. What more do we want to see? They want the Republic to be proclaimed before they can actually put the rubber stamp on it. We can't have the election. We can't give them local government recognition. We can't give them a republic, and they plan to destroy us locally, like Tia said just out the front. They plan to implement Agenda 21 locally. Chapter 28 of Agenda 21 states that this agenda needs to be implemented locally through local Agenda 21 acts. So they want to do this locally, so you need to act locally. You need to get active in your own community and start to get people together and start to get people to understand what's going on, so that we can stop this election from occurring and stop this robbery from going on. So, and we already know that the federal government's given authority to the United Nations to act directly with our local government. They don't have to go through our federal or state parliament, our governments. They can just deal directly with our local government to implement these local Agenda 21s. All right, so which political party is pushing this? Well, we always tell people this is totally apolitical. Both major political parties support this move. It has bipartisan support. Both major political parties have leaders that have pending grand jury charges and have concealed them. Both major political parties have been deceiving the public for years. Both major political parties have concealed the Crown being removed, and both parties have concealed Agenda 21 for the last 20 years. So, can you allow this to continue now that you know about it? No. Well, we can't, and as a group, every council and councillor in Victoria has to be served a legal and constitutional notice. Melton, Wyndham and Gippsland councils have all been served this notice, but their time to reply has expired with absolutely no response. You need to serve one on your council. Get together and serve into your council. Every senator in Victoria is about to be served. Every corporation involved in the deception, whether knowingly or unknowingly, is about to be served. So what can you do? The first thing we can do is what Brian said, put your name down for a grand jury. Other things you can do, thanks for coming today. Basically today was about, getting people to understand what's going on. You can also fill in charge sheets for Julia Gillard. We've got blank charge sheets all filled in. All you need to do is put your details on there and they'll be filed into a court when someone's in court. Legal and constitutional notices to councils. Serve them one. If you don't know how to serve a legal notice, talk to someone who's already done it and we'll let you know how you can do it. Challenge the courts. Every time, if you're in court for whatever reason, challenge them. Someone once told me it only takes you a speeding fine. It's the cheapest way to get into court. So,
Parking tickets cheaper.
Parking ticket cheaper. There you go. There's an alternative. local government recognition flyers in your neighbourhood. People need to understand about the deception. There's a flyer that's available at the back table that's two-sided. If you want to take some and feel free to copy them and distribute. Basically, they tell you all the reasons why this can't go ahead. And we have authority to circulate that flyer. Educate yourself. There's nothing, you know, more
Can I
important.
stop you on that point?
Yeah.
Authority to what?
IPA, which is the Institute of Public Affairs. They've put all the pros and cons of local government recognition on a flyer, and I've called the professor down the bottom to give her authority to circulate it. So you can, sorry?
Do you need that?
Well, I want to do it properly. I'm not going to get anyone into any sort of trouble, so I just did. She said, go for your life, do whatever you want with it. So have a look at it. If you agree with it, circulate. If you don't, keep it to yourself. Now, on the back of that flyer, we've added local details, so you might want to just modify it a little bit to suit your needs. Alright, so...
Can we just say something, Bruce?
Yeah.
About just encourage those who haven't been in the court system. Jerry and I in court in Wall at the county court, he was challenging not wearing a seatbelt. It's been going on 3 years to the point of getting in the county court for appeal. In that process, we presented the documents, we presented the crown was removed, the constitution, all these things we're talking about now, one by one. He said, not relevant to this matter, I want to stick to the charge. Not relevant. What about the crown? Oh, it doesn't matter about the crown. The parliament gives us the authority, and then you try and trace it back above that. Well, what about the 75 Victorian Constitution? Has it got proper authority to instigate this parliament to bring in these laws? Not relevant. So you only need one little thing to go in there and do that, and I suppose you can, this information is available. It's all out there on the internet. If you take that stand, what you do is they set themselves, they're committing crimes in the court by not dealing with those issues. So what you have to do is bring it up to their attention, and then you get the transcript. And then you've got the evidence when you charge them to go on the grand jury. That's what you need to do. So you only have to ask them questions, and they compound the offence every time they refuse to deal with the issues you present. That's what you're presenting now. So that's for those that haven't been in court yet, but for those that have, you probably understand a lot of those things.
Right. So what's gone wrong? Now we can call it a lot of things. We can call it our ignorance of the law. We can call it about, you know, our Aussie attitude of she'll be right, mate, or someone else will take care of it. Or we can blame it on the trust that we place in our politicians to do what's good for us. But all these things are what got us into this mess in the first place, and we need to do something now because we're in the 11th hour. It's our last chance. If we don't do something now, basically we have no one else to blame but ourselves.
More guts than the preachers here in Victoria. I don't say that to discredit them, but I am saying it to the preachers. It's time you got involved in this. Yeah. Because when it went to the floor of the House of Lords, and you can get that transcript, don't get it off the web, it's been bastardised. And I wouldn't say I've got it because then everyone will say to me, where can I get it? Please, State Library will give you a copy. It's as good as the day it was there in that thing. The transcript is excellent. But it's an historical document. The decision was this. They chose 12 men of the House of Lords to be the jury. The matter was on the floor of the House of Lords. The jury said this. The bishops are right, the king is wrong. What happened? The king immediately had to leave England. That's why it's called the Glorious Revolution. It was done by a jury trial on the floor of the House of Lords. Not a shot fired. But the king had to leave, and he went and got sanctuary in France and Saint-Germain, and from there they shipped him into Ireland to write what you call the Bill of Attainers. Now what's a Bill of Attainder? It's a bill that he signed against 4,000 Protestants, so that showed what his real intent was. Now if you're on a Bill of Attainder, it means this. You're not allowed to look at it, you're not allowed to see it, you've got a 30-day amnesty, but you don't even know if you're on the bill. The execution of the bill is hung, drawn and quartered. So that, what he wrote down in Ireland, showed his intent. In the meantime, William and Mary had been brought in from Amsterdam. And they were told, you can take the throne, it's yours, But if you don't declare the 1688 Bill of Rights before you get there, you're not getting there. That's why that bill is so important. And then people say in Australia, we haven't got a Bill of Rights. That's your Bill of Rights. And it's linked to Section 44 of the Commonwealth Constitution for all you researchers. But it's the history of what went wrong in England. Now, when they had this issue here, in the annotated notes you have something that says, humbly relying upon the blessing of Almighty God. Most people say, oh, they can't pervert the Constitution or whatever. I said, what about the bit about God? I said, I don't want that bit. So they become constitutional specialists but leave God out. But you had another one under there, if you go back to the annotated notes. Humbly relying upon the Supreme Being. What happened when they took the crown out? The other one automatically come in. The Supreme Being is the Supreme Being of Freemasonry. So you have a Masonic government that inserted itself over the other one. And unless you understand the whole facts, because people have been saying to me, they don't understand. I said, it's like instructing kids. You don't go down to the level of the kids. You bring the kids up to where you are. And you haven't got time to understand. You've got 6 weeks. What you're going to do on that back table will have enormous legal ramifications, and I can't tell you how big they are, because it's already in the pipeline. And I can't say, trust me, please don't. Put your hand down for a minute, please. Only because I'm answering your question. I think most of you have been so programmed that you don't understand you are the government.
Amen.
You are so programmed to be submitted to it that you can't understand the reality of it. The reality of it is you, as the elector, that's your job. Now, the court says to me, but if you're challenging the jurisdiction of the court, how can we make an adjudication? I said, Your Honour, you're wrong. I am not challenging the jurisdiction of the court because the jurisdiction of the court belongs between the monarch and the subject. You are being challenged for your fraudulent misconduct within this jurisdiction. Totally different challenge. It's no different than a trustee of a trust having no auditors for 30 years. And suddenly the auditors walk in and say, we're here to audit the trust. Well, hello, folks. Well, that's what's happening here. You're here to audit the trust. But they said, put your trust in us and vote for us. And it's as simple as this. If the senator, I nominated for an election here in the alternate seat and in the Commonwealth seat, not to be a politician. I do not want to be a politician because I don't want to be married to the mob. You know what I mean by that. But I nominated to find the mechanics of it. And when they used to say to me, what's your policy platform? I say, I haven't got one. I'm only here to reveal that this is government fraud. And everybody said, that can't be a platform. I said, it's pretty good one for me. But I learned the mechanics. That's why I understood who issues this writ, because I had to do something that says the return of the writs. I said, what's the return of the writs? That's when you do the election petition to work out who's disqualified, which I did, sent it to the High Court. The High Court blocked it. It's not yet been heard, so you can activate that election petition because it's still sitting there. But I learned the mechanics of how you issue the writ, because I'm looking at this return of the writs. What are you talking about? So I rang the election. What's this return of the writs? Who issued the writs? House of Reps is the Governor-General to the Australian Electoral Commission. But now it takes a different light for the senators. The Governor of the state issues the writ for the senators. It comes like this. The Governor of West Australia took the picture of the Queen off the wall, put himself there, chucked her out the window, enacted the act, but then a couple of weeks later writes a writ that now sends the senators of West Australia to Canberra. Does that affect your vote? But here comes the problem. Does that mean every governor in the Commonwealth is complicit to this? Now I want to ask you a real good question from Victoria, because you're sitting in Victoria. Who's your governor? Don't answer their question because you've got the research. Let them answer it. Because you've got to get involved in the players. Your governor is Alec Chernoff. a grand jury defendant charged in 2004. So they took a Supreme Court judge and made him a governor to say you couldn't get to grand jury. That's statute law. You're not dealing with it here, you're dealing with it in common law. Common law will outrank statute law. It outranks statute law. So we take common law and force it back then to hear it as statute law, or all the Supreme Court judges become the defendants. Got the point? Because I said to the President at the time, when that question was asked in Cause of Revolution, I said, you're talking about the glorious revolution of 1688. Of course. It's a jury trial on the floor. That's where you are. You're on the floor of the electorate. But can your decision force the Supreme Court to hear it under statutory law? Of course it can. Because this decision, all of this, is going to go straight onto the web. And then suddenly 20 Supreme Court judges are going to go say to each other, if we don't let this happen, we're going to become the defendants. Now, when you're doing a grand jury application, statutory law, let's say you're the judge, or there's 5 judges, you are not allowed to enter into the evidence. You can only look at the charge and then an affidavit that supports, full stop, that's it. Because if as judges you enter into that evidence, you have usurped the function of the grand jury, which is in the next room waiting. Got it? So there's 2 jurisdictions. You're only allowed to look at the form. Then it's got to go to the grand jury. Now what you're doing here is reversing that by doing a common law, forcing them there, and then make it statutory, so the structure, the whole judicial structure, will become your enforcement. We can switch this from common law into statute law and force them into it. As long as you stop this little lady here, Julia, proroguing, you've got 6 weeks to stop it, because the proroguing will officially happen on about August 2. 42 days before September 14. Now here, please, beware. When they know you're coming, will they shorten the election date? So be ready now. Don't come out of the starting stall sitting on your Shetland facing backwards. Got my point? Chris, I'm not saying it. Please forgive me. I'm actually making it just a eulogy. Now people say, and then I say, how are you going to stop the bolting horse? I'll give you the answer. Only the rider on the white horse can stop the bolting horse. Is that the correct answer? Yeah. Amen. I've finished. Did I answer your question?
Faith in Jesus Christ, and then, as though somebody might say yes, but not me, he adds, for all.
You are guilty.
We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich.